Any opinions? Knock yourself out.
It's probably worth adding, we're not going to film anybody asking questions, so it's safe to ask a question, because obviously it is a concern for those people who are here who still visit Thailand that you're at this event. So you're safe to ask a question without being on camera.
Since I'm going to talk about some of this issue in my afternoon session, I try to be brief here, but I feel that I cannot let this go without commenting. The issue of who have the most power between the military and the monarchy, it's come down to, this is what I said last year in Paris, that it comes down to how you define power. And the thing that troubled me, and I think it's quite wrong, is that you all, three of you, if I may say this, I think that you define power in the kind of utilitarian instrumentalist way or modern rationalist way. Power means you order this A person to do this B thing, C thing, D thing. It has to be something that's very concrete, like order this to change this or do that. And once you define power like this, you end up saying that the monarchy had no power, or either Ungpakorn is just a puppet, right? And to pick up what Nicola said, that the alliance between the military and the army just, oh, by the way, the funny thing is that Ungpakorn probably never had that kind of power, or never at least exercised that kind of power, but his son actually did. His son actually ordered somebody to do this or this. But Ungpakorn rarely, I studied him for years, for decades, he rarely used that kind of power. You could say that he didn't have that kind of power, and I would totally agree. But it depends on how you define power. If you define power that way, you would end up like Ungpakorn have no power at all. The monarchy have no power, and the monarchy have power. To use our Nicola and use the word of convenient, right? So the partnership of convenient, and Andrew said even Ungpakorn is just a kind of puppet for the elite, right? One of the key idea in Andrew's book, which I think most of the people don't pick up. Most of the people, I think, read his book, read his work, and thought that he must be opposite of Giles in the sense that he's think that the monarch Ungpakorn has a very much power, but actually I'm glad that you spelled it out today. But that is the point that I think is wrong. And in the book you said the loyalists didn't actually loyal to Ungpakorn. They just used him, right? And so the whole book implied that you expect even Ungpakorn wasn't loved by the loyalists. His son would finish, and you expect this kind of war of succession all the time, but it turned out that it didn't happen. The elite happily let his son, this guy, become king, right? And so you end up in the end trying to explain how on earth people tolerate him. All this came down to the very idea, the very core idea that I challenge, that you all define power very narrowly. And to put it in a more leftist language, you all underestimate the power of ideology, the power of system of thought. You grew up in modern Western country, which this kind of thinking has long gone for a century. And you don't quite understand how people would love someone, how people would love this guy, how people would loyal to him and would feel that they could die for him, literally. Of course, in actual history, modern history, not many people die for Ungpakorn really, right? But they put others to die for them, right? But the thing is, if you define power that way, you would say Ungpakorn have no power, the Thai monarchy have no power, and you end up, this is just a puppet. But to come back to Giles finally, there's a sentence that's very striking for me. And unfortunately, the Giles seem not to think of this in the overall framework of it. He mentioned at one sentence, I'm not sure that other can pick up. He said that power came from legitimacy and the support of the people. I totally agree, 100% agree. Power comes from legitimacy and the support of the people. And then I asked, think about this and the whole framework that Giles said, the whole metaphor about God or the whole example that cite this incident and that incident. This is a kind of example or the kind of thinking that, as I said, instrumentalist utilitarianism, the definition of power. Like power has to be certain A people order certain B people to do certain C or D or E people, right? But come back to that sentence that Giles said. Power comes from legitimacy and the support of people. And I asked, over the last century, over the half century, who in Thailand have the most legitimacy and the most support of the people in Thai context? Bhumibol. Not by a really long shot. Anybody, no one else can compare to him. Isn't this kind of power? Isn't this the answer that he had the most power? But it's not he in the sense, and I'll talk to this in my session later, it's not actually he in the sense of he himself, it's both sense of he himself as Bhumibol and as himself as embodiment of something that very bigger. But I think it's totally wrong to think that power have to be defined this way. And then you end up cannot explain a lot of things, a lot of why Bhumibol has such this power, why he can trigger the process of that we call Tulakar Pivat and no one else can.
Okay, thanks very much, Sultak. Please. People think the cameras are all in this direction, so don't be scared.
Are we starting the discussion
Yes.
now? I think I totally agree with that power thing. So this is the first time I have heard that Bhumibol is weak and a puppet. I grew up in Thailand, have high education, and I read The Kingdom Was Mine. I think it's a terrific book, and it never came to my mind that he's weak. He's a puppet. Maybe he was weak before he Sari came to power, but then after that he learned that he has power. He learned how to use it, I would believe. And I think at the end he shows that he has the power by several military coups, but he agreed on, at least he did not disagree on military coup. He did not do what he could do, that also a power that he might have, and he didn't stop the coup. He profited, he benefited from it. So I would, that would be my comment, that I sort of disagree with the weakness of him.
Thanks very much. Shall we continue this topic a little bit and then move on to other points? What do other people think?
Well, I'll quickly reply, if that's okay. I agree with Ajahn Sobsak that the ideology and the monarchy has become an institution that has enormous power that can be utilised, and I believe that's why Ungpakorn is able to do so now. But as you said yourself, Bhumibol never told people what to do, so I guess you're arguing that he had power, but he never used it. And to me, when I look at Bhumibol, he couldn't even manage his own family. He couldn't control his wife. He couldn't control his kids. So we can see several instances where things that he wanted to happen didn't happen. So this is why I think I agree with you that over time the monarchy built up potential power, which his son is now using in a very obvious way.
Don't you agree with my criticism that, or at least you should try to reply that the whole that you just virtually every incident that you cite, that he ordered this, ordered that, it came down to how do you define power. And you always define power that this way, right? You have to define power that you have to be able to order person A to do specific thing C or D. This is not the kind of power that Bhumibol or the monarchy had at all. The actual historical fact that sometimes he can order something or not order something is not proof at all that he doesn't have power, unless you define power very narrowly that way, right? And if you define it narrowly that way, I would agree with this or that incident that he had this power to do this or do that. I would agree. But the whole point of my criticism, which I don't think that anybody could reply really, that you define it, that you have to look at power this way, but why? And if you look at the whole picture of the whole Thai history, why not define power more broadly and look at it this way? And this is how the Thai define power. And to go back to the very sentence that Jai really like very much, power comes in modern time, not even from the gun. Gun might create power temporarily for a short period of time, but the real power in modern time comes from legitimacy and support from the people. Who else in the past 50 years come close to matching Bhumibol? No. Not a single person, not a single army chief, not a single popular, not even Thaksin.
But I think I would like to add something to this. I think we all agree upon that the military derives its legitimacy from the monarchy. Yeah? They have created a myth around Bhumibol as a loving father of the nation, and no one dared to challenge this. Of course, there are critics, but they're outside the country. And so I would actually would like to go into the direction and would agree with Giles to a certain extent, because Bhumibol decided to have Ungpakorn as its successor, but Ungpakorn was 20 years old, so it was the long-term decision already. And when Ungpakorn was 20 years, and breaking this law, this palace law, or disputing Bhumibol's decision, the military would never have done that. Yeah? Because then they had to admit that the institution, the palace, the monarchy, is something which is not untouchable anymore, which is something which you can handle any time you like. Yeah? In a way, it fits you.
Well, wasn't that power?
In a sort of ideological power, as you pointed, but it doesn't necessarily contradict Giles' assessment to this. So I think the military deriving legitimacy, and it's all about legitimacy to suppress the people at gunpoint, from deriving this from the power source of the palace, this ideological power. Only if Bhumibol really, if he really had power, I really disputed this. Yeah, the power came for the old and conservative establishment, the military and the other elites, just came from the palace, because they have to rely on the palace. Yeah. And they are staging coups in the name of the monarchy, saying, oh, the king is so sad, now we have to oust the Thaksin regime. And the king gave his blessing to the coup makers and endorsed the coup in the end. But it was not his decision to stage a coup. Yeah? There are military circles who decided to stage the coup in 2006. And in
for him?
For him, in his name.
Yes.
In his name.
Yes.
And in 2014, actually, the king has already
wasn't that power?
Just a second. And in 2014, King Bhumibol has become already so old and frail and sick, and he wasn't aware of what was going on in Thailand anymore. So yeah, the coup in 2014, it speaks for itself. Yeah, who was responsible for this and who has the real power in Thailand? I don't think really it was Bhumibol also in the decades before, so it's really
I think you.
Somsak, let's let Jai respond as well.
Yeah, I just want to point out that I grew up in Thailand and went to Satit Jula, so don't try and claim that I'm a Westerner. I'm both a Westerner and a Thai. That's a rather racist explanation. Now, yes, Somsak, talks about abstract power. I talk about concrete power. We can talk about abstract power if you like. We can talk about the power of gnomes and fairies and all sorts of things that are abstract. But real power in society can be proven. Now, yes, power can be derived from legitimacy, or it can be derived from the barrel of a gun and so on. The question is, a table with my mother and father, who were very close to ruling circles in Thailand. We had discussions about politics all the time. And they were of the opinion that Bhumibol was a weak, characterless puppet of the regime. This is not just my feelings. And the reason for this is that he never stuck his neck out on anything. He didn't dare to. I mean, okay, he was very weak when he first started, when he was on the throne. He wasn't even expecting to be on the throne. Now, this isn't something that Somsak and I would disagree about, because he's talking about a different concept of power. You know, there are powerful systems of thought throughout the world. It's not just a Thai thing. There's a powerful system of thought about the free market, where, you know, it's difficult to argue against the free market unless you get movements in society that confront the issue. You got movements in Thailand that confronted the legitimacy of the king during the communist uprising. You have seen a revision of this during the red shirt movement. But, you know, it's not good enough to just say that there is this airy-fairy sort of powerful thought system. When we debated this in Paris, Somsak asked me to give an example of someone who you couldn't criticize, who seemed to be all-powerful, and I said God. And that's true. It's a good example. God cannot be criticized in certain circumstances. You can be executed for it. People act in the name of God all the time. It doesn't mean that God is really powerful. So an ideological thought system, yes, the pro-monarchy ideological thought system has a lot of influence in Thailand, but its influence goes up and down. And actually, I think that the person that had more power than Bhumibol at some point in Thai history was Thaksin Shinawatra. But other people who've had more power through other means, not through legitimacy in the ballot box, have been the military.
I think it's clear that there are different sources of power. So the barrel of the gun, money or capital, and ideology and legitimacy. So I think any ruling class uses all three sources of power to rule, and so I think that's pretty basic. You know?
Actually, I want to kind of look forward a little bit, and it'll be a bit utilitarian this way, because it's interesting that we have the abstract version of power, and of course, for me, I feel like, okay, the monarchy as a system has or had it, but now when the monarchy changes to this current king, that power is gone. So, or like I feel that it's gone, he doesn't have that cult anymore. So what I'm wondering now is, how does that play out with the utilitarian power that the junta now has, and that it's now using to suppress, you know, pro-democracy discussion in Thailand? Because of course, even if the people are not happy with the king anymore and they now see him as a person, you still have the actual power of the gun. So how do we go forward from here? What is, where do we go and what's going to happen?
Can I just add a little bit?
Let some other people talk as well.
Yeah. I wanted to make exactly the same point, but also add to that, that what we're now seeing, even though we said that everything the current king has done is only within his circle, but he is exercising these powers more, at least than I'm aware of, more than the last king. So that's quite interesting for me to see how does the junta now, because they're kind of in a difficult situation now. They cannot rely on this demigod anymore because the image is crumbling. But at the same time, the demigod starts to certainly not be a god anymore who can be criticized and can be tested, but comes down and is visibly seen exercising the barrel of the gun kind of power by, at the moment, secretly taking people away or making people disappear. But over time, that will not be possible to keep that under the wrap anymore. So that's the question.
I think another factor is important is I think the time. Right now we can see the power of military very clear because we're living in the military dictatorship period. Now, if in the future, next year or 5 years from now, there is an election, even though there's a guide, then I'm sure that, the manifestation of ruling class power may or may not show within the military itself, right? So time factor and the period is important. And also, I like the concept of partnership vis-a-vis the who is in control, which is like a black and white, right? And it not necessarily can be shifted, from this side to this side. So it's very important. I think you introduced very important concept in partnership of inconvenience that I think is very useful.
Okay. Anyone else, or shall I get something?
No, I actually not question as such, but I just want to add how important it is to understand Bhumipol power. If you define it narrowly and notice that I'm not denying that many instances can be cited that Bhumipol didn't or couldn't order this or that thing. I never denied it at all. I never reject out of hand this idea of looking at instrumental or specific instead. What I object to is to take this as the whole criteria to define power. My concept of power is actually isn't about abstract or about it all of the thing, but yours is just part of it. And what I would argue is that looking at Bhumipol power, you have to look at what it actually happened in history, and it supports the idea, the point, and it related to the question that some of our friends just asked. The issue of Vajirangkorn is so important in that our friend asked, is that it look at against this kind of power that the monarchy had. What would happen? And this also that you find it difficult to answer why the junta did what Vajirangkorn asked. Vajirangkorn asked to absent for which is unprecedented even among tradition of royal family is very wrong. But the junta complied. Vajirangkorn asked for revision of it, even though it against and the junta complied and so on and so forth. You cannot explain this unless you understand how this kind of power that Bhumipol built up consists of. Of course, we can discuss it later. How would happen that as our friend just asked this very important question, how would it happen when this guy which have no, everybody here, how come he's still there?
One more point I think is very relevant to this. We're all talking as if the monarchy and the military are two totally separate things, but I think under the new king, we're seeing a merger of the monarchy and the military in the sense that the king himself is promoting people that he personally likes within the military. At the ceremony where he promulgated the new constitution, which is a very militaristic ceremony, several people pointed out to me that he deliberately asked to be flanked by the army chief and the police chief. And Private was having to face him, and he was flanked by the heads of the army and heads of police. And this is really a symbol to show that he's saying he has the army with him, he has the police with him. So if we talk about the junta, who's more about the junta and the king, I don't see Private as particularly powerful. He's got to manage a complex organization and lots of different power bases. Same with Private Wongsuan, who was previously the godfather of the junta. And one of the very interesting things we saw in the past few years is that Private was initially the godfather. He was the one that had the power behind the scenes, and power shifted towards Private. So if we talk about the military as a kind of monolithic institution, I think that's wrong. And I think we're seeing a model now of a militarized monarchy. The king is deliberately doing, he's doing all these military ceremonies every day in the Royal Plaza. All of his staff have to have their own military haircut. He has his own military units under his command. The upcoming army chief is elected to be Apparat from the 1st Infantry, which is a long-standing loyalist. So he's got his own military power base, and I think as we discuss who's really in charge of the military monarchy, we've got to recognise this. That we're seeing the king have military power and military influence by himself, and that's another reason I believe that he's more able to call the shots than the junta, because Raja Somsak is exactly right. His behaviour has shocked and troubled the junta. After they went all the troubles having this fake referendum, for them to want to change the constitution, they were horrified by that. They were shocked when they convened Parliament on the night that Ungpakorn died, and they were all set to have a special meeting of the National Legislative Assembly, and the king said, "No, I'm not ready yet." And they had to have, they stood in for silence in 9 minutes, and then they all went home. And to me, that's a perfect symbol of the National Legislative Assembly. It was probably the most representative ever meeting. They met, had 9 minutes of silence, and went home again. And so these are things that show the king is powerful, and show that the junta aren't able to stop him, and they're struggling to manage him. But I think we're seeing it's becoming increasingly difficult for that to happen.
Okay, I'd like to maybe focus on less on the kind of personalized sort of analysis of Vaj. But let's talk about 1932, because I think if we have an event on 85 years of 1932, it's actually quite useful to develop a kind of more long-term perspective of how democracy and counter-democratic forces in Thailand developed over time. So the question is, how do we analyze the 1932 revolution? Was it a revolution?
I think the question that to our audience asked earlier, I think it was pursuing what would happen now if this guy, the Vajiralongkorn, who had no one really like him, assume this position that it used to have this kind of power. I don't know, I just feel that it's a question that...
Can I say something about this?
Well, I think... okay, go ahead, but I think we're sort of getting into a kind of rut there. So that's what I think we need to...
I mean, I think the military are in a difficult position. I think Nicola mentioned this as well. Because the military are used to using the monarchy to legitimise itself. So what can they do? They can't get rid of him, because that would bring the whole legitimacy for the military down. What they can do is hope that he spends as much time as possible in Germany, out of sight. They can also keep the spirit of Ungpakorn alive, and they're doing this with the funeral, and people still wearing black and what have you. They can keep that going for as long as possible, and try to hope that the monarchy becomes something abstract. But will it work? I don't know. I hope it won't work. But I mean, I think that the key question really is, how do we actually struggle towards democracy, and what kind of lessons can we learn from Thai history since 1932 about that?
Back to your
which goes back to the next round of discussion also among the panelists about the analysis of 1932, because I think this is very pertinent to how we now then analyse the ruling class today. So what actually happened? Was it a bourgeois revolution, or did that already happen before, a bourgeois revolution from the birth? as Giles was saying, and then what forces do we see in the recent 85 years of Thai history in the ruling class and against the ruling class in Thailand?
I think Giles already mentioned that the 1932 revolution is an unfinished one. And when you are following the events in Thai history, in recent Thai history, you have seen so many uprisings. People really who risked their lives and limbs to fight for democracy. And we have seen it in October 1973, 1976, 1992, 2010 also. And I'm not sure if we will see, as I already pointed out briefly, if we might see a popular uprising in the foreseeable future. I'm really not sure about this, because the country remains so bitterly divided. And maybe that we have to wait just for growing dissatisfaction with the military regime to, I don't know, that an uprising can be initiated or launched. But you need also, in my opinion, you might need a political leader, yeah, who deserves this name, this characterization, yeah, to be a political leader, really fighting for genuine democracy. And the country is so bitterly divided that at the moment I do not see any popular uprising will brew on the horizon. So for the time being, probably, we have to, yeah, we are stuck with the military regime, unless something really is happening that the people might rise again, as we have seen in Thai history. But for the moment, I do not see it. And it's really heartbreaking to see that so many pro-democracy protests have been crushed by different military regimes and dictators in the past. So yes, it's an unfinished revolution, and if we might see another round of political conflict coming up in Thailand, then there will be further violence and more bloodshed, because I'm pretty sure the junta and the conservative elites, the palace and all the allies, the old elites of the country, they will not give up their power voluntarily and peacefully. So sadly, I'm convinced of this.
I mean, to me, I mean, I'm not an expert on history, so but to me, the key thing about 1932, and it goes also to address Somsak's point about, you know, what is the power of the monarchy. You know, in 1932 there was a revolution which tried to establish a principle that power and sovereignty and legitimacy lie with the people and not with the king. And a large section of Thais have never accepted that. So to me, that's the sense in which it is an unfinished revolution, not necessarily an economic or political economy sense of, you know, the end of feudalism and the capitalist economy, but in ideological terms, you would expect, or you might have expected, that it would become accepted that, you know, power should be with the people, but that's never happened in Thailand completely. Many among the elite are still clearly opposed to it. They've been fighting this idea ever since, and there's this continual idea that politics is a horrible, dirty thing, and politicians are bad, and people shouldn't be able to, you know, uneducated people shouldn't be able to decide for themselves who should govern them, and it should be the enlightened elite and the monarch that do it. So to me, that's the sense that, for me, above all, this is an unfinished revolution. It's that 85 years ago was the moment when, in the first declaration of the People's Party, they said, you know, sovereignty lies with the people, not with the king. They talked about the monarchy's bloodsuckers, you know, farming on the backs of the people. And it was an incredible declaration of the rights of people, of popular sovereignty. And it's been fought ever since. So Giles mentioned that the Bordet revolution or attempted revolution was crushed, the royalist counter-revolution. But on a more ideological level, I think we've seen the elite and the military never accept it and continuing to undermine democracy. And it's a process that's still going on today. But I think in the 21st century, with this new monarch, more and more people will not be willing to accept military rule. So just to pick up on what Nicola said, finally, I agree that, when we look at Thailand, there seems to be no obvious prospect of political change, no revolution. But I would imagine if I was Priotor or one of the junta, I'd be really afraid of the situation. I think that all the conditions are there for there to be change. And when you look at sudden uprisings and revolutions and so on, it often happens very quickly. Something happens that breaks the spell and breaks the fear. And once people suddenly stop being afraid, because let's make no mistake, the junta now and the king, they rule by fear. And often there's a small incident that snowballs, and people stop being afraid, and they start protesting, and the courage becomes quite contagious. So I'm hopeful that we might see something happen. We don't know when, but I think all the conditions are there, and we might see something escalating very quickly, because for all their appearance of power, I do think the regime are actually very weak and very unstable.
And if I might add to this, because you mentioned that, and also Giles mentioned the mass movement, because I think it is important to mention that if there might be a popular uprising, it shouldn't be just focused on or concentrated on one political camp, because we have seen this in the last decade. Yeah, when the yellow shirts came out, then after that the red shirts came out, after that yellow shirts came out again, after a democratic election. I think it's really important to say there has to be an uprising across different political camps, that people, I don't know, shake hands, join ranks against the junta. But since the country is so bitterly divided right now, I don't see this. But I agree that it should be a mass movement, a mass uprising, to get rid of absolutism or the junta, the military regime in Thailand.
I mean, Andrew said that large sections of Thais never accepted the idea that sovereignty be placed with the people after the 1932 revolution. Well, it's not true. When you look at the work of Nicola and Megdrive, you will see that large sections of the Thai population were totally against the monarchy, partly because of the 1930s economic crisis and how they dealt with it. If you look at the work of anthropologists, they will tell you that in that period, in the countryside, most people weren't really concerned about the monarchy, didn't really care about the monarchy, didn't really know what the monarchy did. So it's an elite ideology fed to us through education in Thailand that somehow all Thais have always revered the monarchy. But of course the elites never accepted the fact that power should be with the people, but the elites in the West have never accepted that. They've grudgingly allowed it to take place because they've been forced to do that. But look at the European Union. Greece voted for anti-austerity, and the European Union officials came and said, no, don't care whether the people of Greece voted for it or not. So it's not just a Thai thing. And look at the recent history of Europe. We've had authoritarian regimes. So it's not about the elites believing in it. It's a question of whether or not people who want to see democracy can actually challenge the authoritarian structures within society. And Nicola's talked about how people rise up on many occasions and many of them lose their lives. And I think it's worth just going through very quickly some of the problems with the uprising. For example, in the 1932 revolution, as I mentioned, there was a lack of properly built mass movement and political party, therefore relied on the military too much. Now what about 1973 and 1976? Well, there was a mass political party, the Communist Party, and there was an uprising among urban people. But what did the Communist Party say? The Communist Party told its activists to leave Bangkok, to go to the countryside, under a sort of a Maoist program. And this meant that uprisings in the center of power were left on their own. And this meant that you couldn't push the successes forward in 1973, and they were crushed in 1976. Because the Communist Party collapsed in the mid-1980s. You had another uprising in 1992. This meant that people like Dum Longsi, a thoroughly reactionary politician, could lead that protest. And who gained from it? The Democrat Party, who didn't even take part in the protest. Now the Red Shirts staged a mass uprising as well. The problem is they were too close to Thaksin, so they couldn't go beyond what Thaksin wanted. And they relied on static, prolonged protests. A lot of successful protests throughout the world against military regimes have also included strikes. Look at Egypt, although in the end it wasn't successful, but it brought down Mubarak. So for me, the conclusion is that what we need to do is to build an independent mass movement, not hitch it to some big man like Thaksin or somebody else. And we need to take seriously the organisation of workers in Thailand to bring them into the struggle. And it's not true that workers aren't organised in Thailand. I spent a lot of time among trade unionists in Thailand when I was there, and there are unions there. They're not as strong as I would like to see them, but they are there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks a lot for that. So next round of discussion, I think we're just debating three points that are interconnected. One is the 1932 revolution. How do we analyze that? How do we understand its significance for today? Secondly, what are the prospects for democracy? And you were saying all the conditions are there for a new uprising. Nicola argues that Thailand is too divided for that kind of uprising to happen in the coming months or years. You didn't actually say that, but so soon. And Jai gave a kind of analysis of the different uprisings that we had from 1932 onwards and the political problems that we saw with the strategies involved in these uprisings. Which leads to the third point that we, so the first point is 1932, the second point is the prospects for democratic uprisings or change in Thailand, and the third is then the question of a more detailed discussion of the strategy. So Jai is saying, he's basically criticizing, I think, the political strategy of the Red Shirt movement. He says it was put into deep freeze, and it's problematic to be too close to Thaksin. So that's a third area of debate about the actual strategy and tactics of building a mass movement in Thailand. Your thoughts on that, please? Yes.
I have some observation. I think even though the conditions are there, the conflicts, but why didn't it happen? I think because people still have hope for change in Thailand, and from my observation, I think is that a lot of people still believe in electoral politics. So if they still think that, well, there will be election next year or 2 years from now, it's sort of like, that's why when you say, well, we'll give you election, and then people hope that that would bring change. Now, let's say that 5 years from now there is no election. I'm sure that we probably have another new analysis, right? So hope play into Thai politics also. I think Thai people still have hope that, well, when the election comes, that's the time. I will tell you, right? So now that's point number one. I think just stop it.
What do the young think? And you're saying you are the hopes.
I think it's a bit hard to say that with all the mass movement, uprising or whatever, it's a bit hard to see the goal at the end. I mean, I was born in 1991, so yeah, what is I mean, what can be the end goal of this? Because, you know, I've seen uprising too, but in the end, it just, you know, go on and we have another one. So, yeah, what can we set as an end goal that we want this uprising to head to? I think that's my point.
If, I mean, people usually say for democracy, so what's the problem?
The thing is, we can all say that it's for democracy, but it's so abstract. I mean, everyone, even people who support, I would say, support the army right now, would say this is for a greater democracy. But democracy is so abstract, and I think you cannot just go by the headline, yeah, we are for democracy.
That would have actually been my question for the panel as well, for those who might be more knowledgeable on the 1932 revolution, whether it was a revolution for, I mean, it was a revolution for democracy, yes, but was it for the values of democracy that you could find in a, I don't know, in a university where people discuss democracy, or were there special interests, so to say, that were kind of driving the change? And if we talk about bourgeois revolution changing it into a capitalist system, which wasn't the case in 1932 because the capitalist system was already introduced, that would have been my question too. What were we actually, or what were they actually fighting for back then, and what were the other uprisings fighting for? Were they really fighting for the ideals or for ideals? Because often mass movements, they do have the ideals in the background, but they're also driven by a certain, or by certain pain points that are often, yeah, and that's why things can spread very quickly, based in certain incidents or yeah, pain points basically that people feel, okay, now is the time to change something.
Just to add, yeah. So what are we fighting for now? And so to overthrow the military, that's fine. But what's going to happen afterward? I think that's, I mean, I'm not very well versed in politics, and most of the time I'm really passive about it because, you know, it's always the same thing every time. So just, yeah.
I guess at the end, you want to make a panel like this in Thailand.
Yeah, we've had to go to jail straight afterwards.
That's what I call democracy.
So I just want to add something, maybe what he has asked. So I think Thai people, or the red shirt people, they still have hope, I think, after the election, that they can move freely, more freely, and to maybe to be able to assemble themselves and to make protests again. I think that's the point, what they hope for. And I don't think that they believe that the election will bring something positively in terms of good democracy. Yeah? And yeah, so, and I'm afraid that could be an illusion, because this army, the government will still control the power, and to keep close eyes on this movement or on the leaders, political leaders. So nothing could happen after the election, after the next election, I think. Is that true? What do you think?
So people are kind of hoping that if elections happen, then there'll be more political space to have this kind of meeting again, and then you can start again. And so they're kind of waiting for that to happen before they risk too much.
My second point is, I think the first point is hope, right? I think people still have hope for the future of Thailand. Second point that I want to, from my observation, is that I think right now we see a lot of young people involvement, right? For example, we see in Hong Kong, right? You see, you know, young people come out and directly involved in politics by running for office. I think if Thailand if Thailand wants to change, I think the young not only think just protest and come out and into academic, they have to really embed themselves in the electoral politics, run for office, whether at the local level or national level, or if they have a means, they can form a new party, alternative parties. The more participation in the politics is important, not just build a movement, be an organizer. We have to look beyond that. Those are important. I'm not saying it's not important, but go beyond themselves. Don't criticize that you know politicians are corrupt. If they're corrupt, why don't you be a good politician? Directly involved in there. Even that would be a good thing, I think.
Okay.
Can I just a little bit? Not really a question, but I just talked to a friend from Thailand about this very point. I just occurred to me that Thailand is against one of the major trends in the world, at least compared to Western countries, right? That is the involvement or coming out of young people, right? We saw this in Sanders, in Corbyn, in even Macron case, in Mélenchon case. In all these cases of Hong Kong, if you include that, people 20, 30, or some even teenagers come out and it make a difference, even though they didn't put Sanders as a nominee, that it's come quite close, right? Even though, and it have a more than expected result for Corbyn and so on, even Macron or Mélenchon. But during the past 10 years, one thing that always bothered me really is why we haven't seen and this sort of, and you remember Thailand experienced more tension, more crisis than any place else there. I think we could argue that a lot of people dying, a lot of fighting, but let's talk frankly. We saw some of students come out, like people like even native with Jan New, Rome. We all know this, but they are already minority. And this past 10 years, not in a single university that close to a kind of student movement come out. And if I, as a context, we're talking about in Europe or in the West, and I just talked to some friends here yesterday that one thing that very noticeable is that compared to in the 70s, before the 14 October incident, there's a lot of movement among Thai student board. In United States, for instance, and there's a lot of Thai activists emerged in the 1970s. And this past 10 years, there are a lot that feel, I know that led church movement in US and in Europe too, and US, but almost total silent on among Thai students. Why? How would we explain this sort of phenomenon? And it's so striking, and it's something that I always feel a little strange.
So, I wonder why you are surprised.
Sorry?
I wonder why you are surprised, thinking of the education system in Thailand.
That's the big issue. But on the other hand,
The socialization system in Thailand.
also
What
you've
do you
got thousands.
expect?
You have thousands of, many hundreds of thousands of Facebook followers, right? Most of them are young people. They're debating and interacting. I think this is an amazing thing, and I don't think we should underestimate it. There's never been a mass forum for young people to talk like there is on your Facebook page and Facebook, the social media.
No, I don't think that explains it.
So I think this is a useful phenomenon.
But could I,
The cultural system, the social system in Thailand.
Maybe you're going to the wrong point. Why do we still have to expect the student to become like the leader of the movement and to become more active? Why we are seeing that now putting privilege to the students as something like the hope of the democratic movement is something that we are going to reproduce the same structure of the culture that we still need someone of the people who are very educative people to become powerful, dominated, to be dominant in the country. This is the thing that happens all the time. And for me, I think that what we need is like the worker rights or the worker movement that should be more seen and visible than today. Today we are going to talk about young, poor, the student. What are they doing? seeing today is not just only the student, many people in Thailand, they are really ignorant in many parts of the political and social spheres. So, but now what we are focusing now is just only a part of minority of the society, and that's why in the 60s, something like this, Bourdieu or many of the French philosophers, something like thinkers, they try to attack to this point that what are we going to do now? We are going to put the privilege to one group of the people who are called students. Is it the right way of the democratic movement to be to become the futuristic for the future? And the reason that we have seen that the students are really very passive, very ignorant, I think it's so not so complicated to see that in this actual society, we have seen that the society tends to be more consumerism. How to say? Consumerism. Wow. Yeah, it's the only kind of thing that try to make the people be happy with the system that bring them or give them their happiness. And people who want to conform to this kind of norm, so they will not come to be aware of what they are now suffering from the mainstream structure, because they are now getting this kind of the tribe or in French it's chantage. And that's why people are now becoming more and more silent, and that's why I'm not wondering that many of the students of this young age, they are now very inactive comparing to the people in that era, in the 60s or in the 70s, when we see that political, geopolitical reason or factor in that moment, it seems to be more and more tense, and so we cannot compare this era of a really extreme capitalist society to that kind of era. So if we need a real movement right away, we should forget that the student can lead the movement, but it's all the people, ordinary people, and everybody, especially the people who are suppressed by the capitalism. We need to fight together, especially with the workers and those who are now unseen. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Anyone want to respond to that? Yeah.
I think Andrew is right to be optimistic about young people, and young people doesn't always mean just students. I mean, there are young workers, there are school kids as well. But Somsak mentioned Neti Wit. Neti Wit has just been elected as to the Council of Ungpakorn University Student Council. So, I mean, that shows that people are prepared to support him. They know exactly what he stands for, against SOTUS, against the military, against uniforms and so on. So I think that's a little bit of an indication of what's going on. Now, I think the discussion is quite interesting in terms of that. I think it's probably quite a good explanation to say that a lot of people have hope for the elections in the future, and that's why they're not coming out as a mass movement right now. And I think that elections can link into uprisings. For example, if people elect a government and the powers that be say this government can't bring in this and this policy, then people will get angry and might come out to support the government. I think that, you know, for mass movements to occur and to be successful, you need splinters at the top. You need pressure from below, causing arguments among the elites, among the military. I'm not convinced that a movement for the future can just be reassembled from the red shirts. I think that the red shirts are finished, but the individuals who formed the red shirt movement could well be involved. Now, there's an important question raised: what is the end goal? Well, I could tell you what my end goal is, and all of you could tell you what your end goals are, and they will all be different. So don't expect one single end goal. It's easier to say we are against this, this and this, and unite about it. And then when we've got rid of the military junta, we can carry on an argument about what next. And different people can mobilise for whatever their end goal is. So I think it's unrealistic to say we want an end goal, this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it's absolutely right that everyone in Thailand claims to be for democracy, even General Bayut.
Great, very interesting debate.
If I can just add a couple of things. We're all talking about uprising, and just to elaborate on some earlier points, I think we may not see an uprising, but we're seeing a change happening at the level of attitudes, and that's why we're talking about the young people, about why I think social media and other things are important. And I think you're exactly right, and it's not just in Thailand, all over the world we see revolutions and uprisings, but they don't really change the underlying power structures, and maybe more importantly, they don't change this underlying culture, or fake culture. So, education isn't improved, people are still not allowed to debate openly, and so we keep on falling back into the same mistakes, the same situations. And so to me, that's why I think changing attitudes is really important. And I think in the 21st century with mass media and social media and so on, I think revolutions and social change will increasingly happen on that level, and not so much students marching through the capital city or whatever as we had in the past. And we're all worrying and wondering how are we going to get Thailand more democratic. Which can be quite depressing. But if you flip it around and put yourself in the shoes of the junta or the king or the elite, what's their way forward? What's their end game? I can't see it. Attitudes are changing. Thailand's getting wealthier, and at the level of income of Thailand now, it's almost unheard of for a country to regress backwards. And interestingly, we're seeing it in 2 countries now, Turkey and Thailand, that have both reached a level of wealth we'd expect it to become at least more overtly democratic, and we're seeing it moving backwards. But how long can that be sustained? Because even though economic growth is slow, Thailand is getting richer, the provinces are getting wealthier, the world is getting more interconnected, and how long are Thai parents going to put up with their children having a disgraceful education that leaves them totally unfit for the modern world? Sooner or later, people are not going to accept that, and they're going to demand changes. So even if we don't see an uprising, I think we'll see the regime slowly falling apart because they have no way forward. We know they're going to try to move into this kind of managed, guided democracy, as Giles said, where they have fake elections, but the same people are still in charge. We know that the king is going to continue to behave in ways that basically remove or break the spell of the monarchy. There's no real way they can cling to power because, unless they try to turn the clock back and put Thailand under a coconut shell, freeze Thailand as many of them want to do, but that doesn't really work. It can't work forever. So sooner or later, things will change, possibly quickly by something suddenly happening, but I think if not, it'll happen gradually. And, that's my real hope, because I'm already, even in the past decade that I've been focusing on Thailand, I've already seen so much of a change in attitudes, especially amongst young people. I've seen an enormous increase in debate and discussion, ironically because it's banned in Thailand, but we all debate a lot online and so on. And when I look back towards even 10 years ago, like I say, I think we often underestimate how far we've come.
Thank you.
Don't you think that, just from my observation, that most Thai people still go by attitudes of what we call in English NIMBY, not in my backyard. So if it doesn't affect their life, their everyday life or anything, it's quite hard for them to gather everything, their heart, their soul, everything to make a movement. You think this trend is going to change at all? For me, I think it's going to stay the same, because if it doesn't affect you personally, if your life still goes on, and why you have to change it? That's the attitude that I observe from the Thai culture.
Yeah, if I may respond to that, because I think that yes, and that's also what I would think, that if it doesn't bother me, then why would I be bothered to join an uprising or whatever? But because the world is getting more and more connected, restrictions will bother me more and more. So if the junta decided tomorrow to shut down Facebook because they don't like the whole of Facebook, because they don't like that there's expression that they can't control, people will be super pissed. Not because they don't like the junta per se, or because they want to have democratic values as an abstract form, but because they love Facebook or they love checking with their friends. Or if they say, well, we're going to shut down a line or whatever service, this will have a huge impact. Or even more, other things that restrict you in a way. You don't want those things anymore. And that's.
But that's the thing, though. That's why they're not doing it yet, because I think there's going to be a huge impact. That's why they're going around the corner. So if they decide to just, kind of put it gently, that it doesn't affect you, your everyday life. You are still able to post your things on Facebook and chat to your friends. So you feel like my life is fine. So I mean, how is it going to change in terms of cultural perception and attitude of the society?
I think at the moment the more serious issue is not about this attitude at all, but it's about the polarization. Had there been no polarization, or specifically some of my friends that support Thaksin and Pheu Thai might not like it, had there been no Thaksin factor, I don't think the junta would going to live any longer much. The one thing that prevents the kind of unified mass movement that cut across the polarization that Nicola talked about, this is one single thing. Really. To be frankly, the thing that people are fed up and dislike the military and sometimes even come out to defend them just because how to prevent the other side to support Thaksin, right? And if I came here, I talked, I think from the very first few months here that I've been here, not here, sorry, in Paris, that the one single issue, nowadays there are no one single person, single organization, single institution, not anything that both sides can agree on. Even down to the very trivial issue of this this celebrity doing that, this thing. People argue all the time in polar position. And when it comes down to this issue of how to get rid of the junta, it's always come down to this. And this, sorry, we can talk about more about this in my afternoon session and invite everybody here. And it comes down back to the issue of how to assess Bhumipol also. I think the other day, Kasian said, and he used this word, and he's very good at creating words. He used this word Bhumipol consensus. I only use a kind of consensus or hegemony of Bhumipol, but he nailed it. He used it, Bhumipol consensus. The crisis that we witness over 10 years now, and it almost occurs every day, every single day for the past 10 years, almost not a single day that you can pass by the first page of the newspaper without referring something to the crisis. It's extraordinary how it happened. You put 364 plus 10 and you got this every crisis on the front page of virtually almost every day. I can dare you look at the newspaper almost every day. You have to have some sort of, sometimes it's big, like in La Pasong case, in this case, but sometimes it's just, but it has to be there. And you wonder how come it possible? And it comes down to this breakdown of Bhumipol consensus. And this, by the way, it shows how important to understand this Bhumipol hegemony or Bhumipol consensus. It's not about his power to order things. It's about the power to hold the society together. And the crisis, the whole crisis, if you come down, you have to nail it. Is that this is the breakdown of Bhumipol consensus, the breakdown of the hegemony that Bhumipol created. And by the way, I cite two issues which is totally irrelevant. One is about the Law 7, about the Lama 7. At the time, nobody even have a dream about Bhumipol. Who Bhumipol? Nobody have even slightly idea Bhumipol would be a king, right? Not to speak of Salit Ila or this sort of thing. And second, if you read what I present, or even not me, Thong Chai, you will see that we carefully suggest that
the position that Bhumipol hegemony that created something very recently. It not happened in the 1950s even. With different idea of how to date it. Thongchai still dated it to 1973. I actually date it to the year that a friend just said her birthday, 1991, 1992. This is how I date Bhumipol. But the important thing is to understand this thing that some say is abstract, and to understand that why the crisis is so important, because so far there's this breakdown of consensus and it polarized into two camps, right? And the core is that we don't have this thing that you have to be consensus about. Sure, we now have a winning somewhat because the other side start to speak about how bad Prayut were, right? But they still come down to it. They, deep in my mind, they know that if we overthrow Prayut or Khosroch, the next thing is Thaksin. And this is the problem. And this is also the problem that in the long term, the question of what the uprising want to achieve is also very important. It's not actually it's not a short-term thing overthrow the military, because from my view, and this is what I'm trying to say for quite some time now, the problem of finding the new consensus, the new sense of community, the thing that would be replaced Bhumipol consensus.
The Bhumipol consensus only lasted from 1991 to 2002, 10 years.
No, not 2002, later than that.
That's hardly...
Nicola?
I would like to add something very briefly to Ajahn Somsak. I think, yes, to a certain extent, maybe we really have to wait either for a new generation of people, and also, on the other hand, for a new thinking. Because it's all about what you mentioned, what will happen after the military rule, the military regime is finished. It's very important, in the case of Thailand, to see, to wait for people accepting each other, accepting election results, accepting each other's, and also deferring opinion. When I was doing interviews with a lot of people back then, I said just when they were talking of the other side, when the red shirts were talking about the yellows were talking about the red shirts, they just, as if they were talking about the enemy, they're not the enemies, they're both poles of a society, with very differing opinions, of course, but you have to, in a certain way, you have to manage to live with each other, because we're all Thai people, so it's your task, you're thinking, how are you going to work together, how are you going to live together, in a country which belongs to all of you. So this would be my question.
This is what I'm talking about, Bhumipol consensus. This is how, at least for about 20 years or even longer than that, how Thai define themselves. We all children of Bhumipol.
I mean, with Bhumipol gone, I'm starting to think, is Thailand going to be so polarized going forward, especially the younger generation? The reasons for polarization have gone, really, because previously it was really defined about whether you were royalist or pro-Thaksin, but Thaksin's been off the scene, for years now. His power is waning. For young people, he's not this bogeyman figure that he used to be. Bhumipol's gone. Nobody's going to really grow up loving the monarchy anymore. It's just going to get worse, and we're going to have more photos probably shared by me and getting things. So it's going to get worse. And my sense from talking to younger Thais, especially, is that they're not particularly polarized anymore, because everybody wants, more freedom. And nowadays I think most red shirts and yellow shirts can agree. They want the rule of law. They want, less corruption. They want to have better education for their children, like people all over the world want, and they can't get it under the junta. You have this ridiculous concept of Thailand 4.0. Thailand's going to become more wealthy. It's not. You can't have a knowledge-based economy when people are forbidden to have any knowledge or discuss things, and you have a terrible education system. So to me, there already is an emerging consensus about all of this, and it's another reason for hopefulness. And to me, these old arguments, between red shirts and yellow shirts, they're kind of back in history now. You don't really see it, or certainly I don't see it so much anymore, because these are arguments about an era that was over, and the situation is changing.
I think that we're missing the point about the arguments between the red and yellow. It wasn't about whether they're royalists or not. It's about whether or not you have the right to elect a government which then spends state money on the poor, on universal health care, on providing jobs, on tipping the balance, which is in favour of the middle class towards ordinary working people. And that's highly political. And you can't have a consensus about that. You don't have a consensus on that kind of thing in any Western democracy. So I think it's a pipe dream to say you can have a consensus. What you need to have is a system whereby the people that believe in democratic decisions are in the majority, and that they suppress those that don't believe in democratic decisions. So in my opinion, the yellow shirts are my enemy, are the enemy of democracy. And unless we can make them shut up and accept democracy, we're not going to have democracy. And we make them shut up by building a strong pro-democracy movement. Now, Somsak talks about the Ungpakorn consensus. It didn't come out of nothing, and I'm sure he would accept that. It actually came out, in my opinion, from the collapse of the Communist Party, the defeat of the Communist Party. So we're seeing a particular right-wing consensus gaining ground around Ungpakorn coming out of the defeat of a progressive movement. So, you know, we won't see a time when there'll be a consensus where everyone will live happily ever after and accept democracy. There will always be arguments and divisions within society.
Okay. Look, yes, sir.
May I tell you a story about my younger nephew for sister. Okay, so he was 3 years old, and he was taught in his school, his kindergarten, to sing a song to praise the king. So we all Thai kids. So at this beginning of schooling, they are all already also propagandized, and so that's why even if Ungpakorn was dead, still his legend, everything was going on, and they're trying to keep this on going, and yeah.
I collected my son from school, Satitula Patom 1, Patom 2. He was telling me about Maharaja.
Yeah.
But he doesn't believe any of it.
Your kid.
Hope you didn't influence him.
But others.
I don't think people are like easily brainwashed. I mean, society is full of conflicting ideologies. People will choose which they believe.
And especially now with technology, you know, it's much more difficult to keep people ignorant nowadays.
During the last 5 years, I always see that there are only three big problems. First, Thai middle class don't believe anymore democracy. They don't believe in democracy. So Thailand would be democratic because the elite, the intellectual middle class, they don't believe. Second, national-wide and big contradiction, which no one knows the end. I will say during the last maybe 5 years, 6 years that the crisis, contradiction, I always said that the national wide and deep contradiction which never happened in 93. Now, in more than 10 years. Until now, no one knows the end. No one in Thailand, even me, know the end. How to decline, how to end the crisis. No one knows. No one knows. And the third problem, both sides, or not only both sides, but I think many people until now they don't know which regime is suitable or bad for Thailand. They didn't know. The yellow shirt, they don't like democracy, but they don't know which regime they want or they will fight for the regime. You know, deeply, they don't believe in monarchy because many yellow have been corrupted by activism of monarchy during year 50, year 60, year 50. But until now, they use the monarchy just to fight with the red shirt, just to fight with the shirt. Because I can have some contact with the yellow leader. I know what they think, what they are talking. You know, I always tell the red shirt that when the yellow shirt meet and talk, discuss, they criticize, they condemn Rama 10 more than red shirt condemn movie phone.
Yep.
Almost all of them not like him, but they don't know how to eliminate it. Because if they join us, they are afraid that vaccine will come back. Yeah. Vaccine will come back. And deeply, they don't believe in Western democracy. They don't believe in Western democracy. So I think this principle problem, the first problem, our ED, middle class don't believe anymore in democracy. Second, division, contradiction in Thailand still go on. And more deeply, you know, like now, every issue in Thailand, like Lamjai, Khai Thong Kham, the yellow shirt take side Lamjai, the red shirt, the red shirt take side Lamjai, the yellow shirt take side Palu. Even Priyo. Yeah. So now, every issue in Thailand is polarized. It's polarized, meaning that the crisis is still with us and deeper and more deeper. No. The solution, you know, as I am former lecturer, many lectures on the army during the last 3 years that how to struggle.
Get Lam Yai to lead the mass movement.
No, you just heard him. She polarized people, right? She polarized people.
And when they ask me how to fight, I said, no, I don't have.
first of all, even people in this, are you feel for the military or are you feel for the monarchy? I'm sure everybody gonna tell you that everybody feel that the fear is the problem for the Thai people. Why we can't uproar? Why we can't get the reader to uproar for this time? Why? Because they are fear. I think from this time now and the rest of this afternoon, we should talk about how to stop people, Thai people, to fear. When they are not fear now, they will uproar. They will come up. They will cry for the democracy. You know, I have experienced all the people know why he didn't dare to like or comment on the Andrew McGregor going such one, or Samsakti. Why? Because Junta make them feel. You know? If you can solve this solution about stop the Thai people fear, everything will come up. If you can make the extremist realize that they just keep their light for the junta, try to make them come back to be no reality that they should cherish their life, you know, and bring their life back from the junta. At that time, I'm sure we will become one, and then we will come out together and cry for our life back from the junta and the military and the monarchy. This is my addition for this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Then some point to Anandaran's problems, namely the first and the third problem. The first one, actually, some people in Thailand, the elite and some middle class, they don't care about democracy anymore because, like the friend over there said, that they live happy now. It's not affect them, and it's already good for them, and it's already good to live in the illusion. And why do people have hope in next generation, in something to change? But I don't think every people understand truly about what is democracy. They just wait for election and just to use their right. But if that process is already correct, like the new constitution is already blocked a lot of democracy process in election. Even though we have election, that's guarantee that we will have democracy. To the third one, I don't feel comfortable with the camera.
The polarization?
Yeah. As Mr. Andrew said, the polarization this show less influence now, but it's not died out. It's always happened in both sides, and it always used as tool for them to fight to gather people. Like to think of the last mob, the last protest from Suthev. They start with anti-amnesty bill and change to anti-Yingluck and change to everything, but they have no end goal. They just let military take everything because it's already maybe actually their real end goal. And to think of the movement, pro-democracy movement, I think we should think more about the goals, and we shouldn't ignore the abstract power.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm an optimist, so I see the point of Jajaran saying that the first one is that the elite and middle class they don't like democracy anymore, and I mean if they look at the way Prayut is running the country and the results, whether or not they'll learn from it. But as an optimist, I think that they can think for themselves that, well, this is the direction that you want the country to go, where you want Thailand 4.0 only on the slogan, but in actuality you cannot, produce it, or you would, don't have you would have single gateway where people won't come in and invest, things like that. I think that through time people will realize, they will learn. Okay. As to the point of conflict, I think it's maybe a new experience for the Thai people, but in any society, eventually they have to learn to live among them, they have to learn. It's a growing pain. It's a growing pain that we have to go through this period. But I think there's still light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. Our session is nearly over. I want to thank everyone for being so concentrated, and in a 3-hour session is quite a long time to concentrate on people speaking a foreign language. Does anyone want to add something to the debate before I let the panelists respond within 3 minutes each or so? Last words, closing words. You want to say something?
Actually, it's just for the information that we have the food for you for the lunch. It's the one I'm hungry now, so just wait a minute. And for the last word, I will give it to the others.
Thank God.
It's
Thank God.
yes.
Okay. Any last words? I think lunch clinched it, so I'll let you three. Who wants to go first?
Yes.
Keep the same.
Again, thank you very much that all of you joined us today, and I can only repeat very briefly what I already mentioned. It's heartbreaking to see in which way Thailand has developed, and after the latest coup, and I really wish, personally for me, that I could go back, but it's not possible. And as long as this is not possible, I will try to the best of my ability to keep reporting on Thailand and Thai issues as a freelance journalist now based here in Germany. But one day I hope that all of us can return to a better Thailand. So yeah, I dream to freedom. Okay.
I also just want to add, thank you all for coming, and just to pick up on something, because I'm also an optimist. Ajahn Jaran, you were saying everything's polarized, even the conversations about Lamyai are polarized. But to me, they're not as polarized as the vicious battles we saw 5 or 6 years ago. The people that disagree about Lamyai or Prao in these cases, they're usually debating. They're not generally saying your view is invalid and you shouldn't be allowed to express it. They're having a debate, and as Ajahn Giles said, debate is good, that's what we want. We're never going to get to a Thailand where we're not polarized in the sense that everybody agrees where to go forward. But the way, as Ajahn Giles also said, so I'm agreeing with him for once, the way to go forward is to encourage debate, encourage discussion, encourage the rule of law. And getting back to your questions and some people's points about what are we fighting for, to me, that's what we're fighting for. We're not deciding the end game. We're trying to create the principles where Thailand becomes a better place. And one of the key ways to do that is by speaking freely and breaking the fear about the lèse-majesté law. And that's why events like this are so important. Because even though there's a small number of us in the room, this is being seen by many people in Thailand. And because they can't discuss safely there, we hold the discussions here. And so thank you so much to everybody who joined in. This is why the junta hate Facebook. This is why social media is important in this struggle. And it's, everybody plays different roles. This is kind of the role that I have in this, is that I just try to, stimulate debate and report things, because other journalists and people in town can't. And so I think it will make a positive difference, and we have to learn that, just as on this panel, all of us have disagreements. We disagree often quite heatedly, and with Ajahn Somsak too, but we all agree on basic principles, and that's the way forward. Thank you so much.
I've been impressed by the participation from the audience in this meeting, which doesn't always occur in other meetings I've been to, so that's really good.
That's it? Great, so lunch is served. When does the second session start?